Good morning or good afternoon, whatever time you looked at this video. But nevertheless, thank you for clicking on the video. You're here. I appreciate you. You're being supportive and supporting Mondays with Mason. I appreciate that very much. Now, before you actually get into the video, there's a couple things I got to tell you. One, I recorded on Zoom. This is my first time recording on Zoom, so the quality of the video may not be that good. I apologize. But after editing it and everything like that, I actually did learn a lot from, what should I do? I took a lot of my own feedback and criticism and stuff like that. So when you get into the video, bear with it. I switched in between speaker view and gallery view, and you'll see that within the video. I couldn't actually fix that for what it is. I apologize, but yeah. So that's number one. Two, in case you forgot what Mondays with Mason is, Mondays with Mason is a dialogue between me and a question asker. And they're asking a question basically that's supposed to spark up conversation or just get the mind thinking in general. Now, there is no preparation for Mondays with Mason. I just want to make that clear. There's no preparations at all. You just get into the conversation. It's just like any other regular conversation. You just get in there and you just talk about it. So there are times where we stumble. There are times where we rant. There are times where you have pauses. But that's just like any other conversation. So I hope that you bear with that as well. So yeah, overall, that's about it. But thank you so much for clicking on this video. I appreciate your support. And without a further ado, here's the video.
So, I can get rid of this. Okay. There you go. All right, so welcome to Mondays with Mason. If you do not mind introducing yourself just real quick, you don't have to give like a whole spiel, just kind of your name.
Okay. Yeah, my name is Deontay Pittman. I'm currently a computer engineering major at the Florida State University. I believe myself, I'm a thinker and just someone trying to figure it out. But yeah, I'm definitely here for the dialogue. I believe that there is currently a huge erosion in our ability to have discourse across the political spectrum. There is current grassroots organizations dealing with that fact called Village Square. Great time. So I guess I would classify myself as someone that's just inspired by their mission to just wanted to, drop the ego and just like talk. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, you feel me?
That's what's up. That's a very different outlook as far as your stance and everything. That's awesome.
It's a lifelong practice. You feel me? Like,
yeah.
I don't answer myself. Shoot.
So I guess without further ado, we can get into today's question. And I'll pull it up here so we know what we are actually talking about. Okay, your question was, why be selfless in a selfless world?
Yes. Why be selfless in a selfish world? Right?
Yeah. So I guess if you can start us off here with, are you asking like what's the purpose, or like why do people even, bother to, or why are people selfless in the selfless world? What kind of direction are you going with that?
When I ask that, I love people. I'm like, yeah, what exactly does that mean? Like, look, part of that is like, that's that emo rap side, you know what I mean? Like, why be that self? I don't know, because I think I believe it was Nietzsche, right? Nietzsche,
Okay.
and I maybe misquoting, but he says even one that is selfless, and that in itself is a selfish act, because the idea of like altruism, it's you're doing something for others, but in the act you feel good, so you're still getting something.
Getting something from it. Yeah.
You feel me? Like, I think in a sense the answer why be selfless in a selfish world, I necessarily don't think, and like the selfless as in the, like when I thought of that, I'm thinking like biblical implications, right? The selfless Maridom that is there to serve like a greater humanity, and I'm trying to like apply that to the actual context and trying to answer that, like, why be selfless in a selfish world? I personally don't believe that form of selflessism, you want to call it, that's not necessarily good, or necessarily like pure to like, or something that should even be sought after, and like in that sense. So yeah, I genuinely don't know, and but I think it's definitely a interesting take nevertheless. Like, what do you think?
Well, first of all, I do agree with you as far as there's no such thing as like an actual selfless act, because you feel good about it, or some people might do selfless things and like claim or say that they won't feel or get anything out of it, and they just want to help that person. But I still think that is a desire, or that's something you get out of it, right? You see that other person benefit from your help and everything like that. So why be selfless in the selfless world? But yeah, so I agree with that notion that there's no selfless act. But I think the concept of being selfless, as far as a label in our selfish world today, is to, I think it's like, it has to do with hope and just trying to like teach others or make others feel like, hey, you can be selfless, and that's a good thing to do. You don't always have to be selfish, and that will cause greater benefits that might even help you down later through the road and everything like that. But it just goes to do that one sacrifice thing. Like, if you do something, you won't get something back immediately, right? But that, you might have good karma. You might get rewarded later on, like way later on, or whatever. You'll be things, won't be things, whatever. But I think it's kind of just trying to put a better image out into this selfish world, because I feel like if everybody turned, just selfish in general, then I feel like there would be some developments that wouldn't happen. Like, church groups go out and they, build schools and something like that. So like, I would consider that's labeled a selfless act because they're not getting paid to do that. It's volunteering. But at the same time, that church group then gets recognition and, status from performing that task, right? So I think, it just turns to a conversation about either you're getting clout or you're getting paid for it type of thing.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like, I'm doing like how people, it's an internet trend how people take videos of them giving stuff to homeless people. Like, what?
Yeah.
I don't understand that. I think that's so weird. I'm like, why are you, recording? Just give it to them.
Yeah.
But see, they're not getting paid for it, but they're getting clout for it.
Yeah. Like, I guess, I don't know, like my thought is, because it's that church group example, how you said the church group goes out, do community work for the greater good.
Mm-hmm.
is that necessarily a self, like in the greater community that's seen as selfless? But based off of perspective, one can say they did it for social recognition, social acceptance. Is this truly a selfish act? And I think what is like, who is the one who defines the selfless or selfish act? Is like,
Okay.
and this is, and the reason why I bring that up is, are we speaking about the greater community? Like, is the bottom line of the value of this action the greater community? As in, oh, if I am sacrificing my time in order to better the world around me and around us, is that in itself, like, is that a selfless act? Although the return, and there's a return for everything. Like, I guess I think we shouldn't think return as far as like some type of like monetary transaction. Just giving, like, is either financial, emotional, like relational. Everything is transactions. You just understand like, those greater systems, and it's like, I don't know, is like, I guess the question is like who, how are we defining that selfless act? Like, is it truly, not even apply like a right or wrong or yes or no, but like, what do you think with that notion?
So are you asking about like the transactions per se, or just?
So I personally believe everything is a transaction. I guess my question is, in order to judge this transaction as a selfless transaction or selfless transaction, like, is it like who, like, how does that dynamic play? Is it the receiver? Is it the great community that they're receiving it defines it, or is it the individual?
I think it's the people outside of the transaction, because I think if you're the participants in the actual transaction, it's, a give or take type of thing. So it would only be like it's either this, they have their own respective inputs or outlooks on the situation. Like, oh, I am giving you this service for, no financial compensation. And then that person receiving it would be like, oh, like, I'm generous for this service that I'm not paying for. But then people outside of that transaction would be like, oh, like, that's a nice thing that he did, but at the same time he did it for clout. And I think that goes back to the homeless recording like example. Just like, you're giving people food, like, in that transaction, it's, I'm giving you some food for free, here you go, I'm giving it to you. The people taking the food, I'm eating it, like, it fills me up. Thank you. I'm grateful for that. I didn't have to do anything for that. But then the people watching the video, they'd be like, okay, like, what was the point of recording it, type of thing. So I think it's the community that gets to decide what type of, if it's a selfless or a selfish act. Because I think only the people outside of the transaction would be able to judge it for something other than what it strictly is, I guess. If that makes any sense.
No, I'm following.
Okay.
And I think, like, isn't that difficult though? It's like, what I'm understanding is that because it's a community that's going to determine that transaction. It's I'm thinking of like politics these days, and I'm thinking of just the role of a politician. And the reason why I want to extend like that example, so it's say that since the transaction is judged based off of community, and so a politician goes and does a service, a good service, but someone goes and looks and sees that in order to achieve that good, he had to make some other transactions that is beneficial for his gain or his constituents' gains, but it's detrimental to others. And so it's like, I guess that's like that, having that reality. Like, we both agree, like having the community determines the good, when the community is so large, man. Like we can't even agree like what is like, oh, that's a selfish act, or that's a selfless act because we got something out of it, or also a selfish act because we are the one that is losing in this transaction. So it's selfless. Like, I don't know. It's insane.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. It is insane because it's like, you only get labeled based on what, others call you. I think that's a, challenging thing in it itself. I'm trying to, sorry, I was messing around with this full screen thing. Yeah, no, that is insane because, like, going back to your politics example, in politics specifically, not everyone's a winner. So it goes to like, oh, I'm doing something good because that will favor me, and that will undermine my opponent or anybody else that's against me or not on my side and anything like that. So, I don't think all quote unquote selfless acts can be labeled up under like political standards. But I think that, like it can definitely be viewed as that. Like nowadays, anything can be political, right? Like, oh, why did the church group go over here instead of over there where it was more needed? And then it goes into the outside community again. Oh, what did they gain from doing that type of thing versus like from picking this location instead of that location, or building this instead of that? Like, what did that add to the community? So everything could be viewed politically, but as far as political standards, I don't think all selfless acts can be like wrapped up into that, if that makes any sense. Yeah.
So let me pick your brain, man. So we're speaking about being selfless in a selfish world, and we understanding just how the reality of it is a little bit of everything. Like it's a little bit of everything with that statement. Like it's dang, I can't even finish my thought. But I'm gonna get to it with COVID, with 2019. I think the idea of being selfish, I think that is a lesson that we're all trying to understand, and not necessarily that negative connotation of being selfish, but being able to be quite selfish with our time in order to maintain and keep care and protect protect ourselves from making some of those transactions that are detrimental to our health that we may or may not be aware of. Like that's, I guess, so far in my journey, that's one I'm understanding in the trend of self-care. What that is, balancing that perception of selfishness amongst community versus being selfish with yourself, and just navigating through that. Like, what are your thoughts on? And how, and will you correlate that being able to balance those two varying things of selfishness and selflessness? How does that look like in the picture of self-care?
When it goes into thinking about selflessness or selfish, switching up between community and personal, there's definitely a line there, because it's like, I feel like for personal reasons, everybody is going to be like selfish, for their own personal reasons, self-help and everything like that. When it comes to like, spending time with either others or themselves, or giving money to like friends, or keeping it for themselves, like I'm reaching out for help, hey, can you lend me like $20? It's like, I have $20, but it's like, I don't have a surplus of money to go around, especially during this COVID and stuff that's going on. So it's like, when it comes to the community standards for selflessness and selfishness, gosh, that's a mouthful. And then with, personal reasons and everything like that. I think those two sides are like almost polar opposites. Because it goes back into personal, I guess, standards or beliefs. Because if it goes anything that maybe affects you directly, like it's like, oh, that's a selfish or selfless move that you just made, versus like in a community, it's like indirect. So it's like, oh, that's not going to affect you directly or indirect, or it's not going to affect you directly in like any type of way. It's like, if somebody goes to build a church in Mexico, that's not going to affect me directly. But if I sit there and see them do that, I get to, decide, oh, like that was a really nice thing to do. Or it's like, oh, that was a really like kind of snakish thing to do, whatever. Versus when it comes back to like my circle and I'm communicating with an individual directly. Hey, like you let me slide in front of you in traffic. Like, I appreciate that. You just made yourself a little bit later, versus you didn't let me do that. Like, I'm trying to get over it, you didn't let me do that. All right, it was a real selfish thing to do because, that happened to me directly. But I feel like that's those things have like polar opposites between happening to you directly versus indirectly. Yeah. So how do you personally, what type of acts do you view as selfish or selflessness? And I know you don't think anything's selfless at all, but like, what would you label that as?
I think it's about purpose. It's not necessarily what the action is, but the purpose behind it determines what is the selfish and selfish act. We all know the one Instagram meme with the person handing $100. Oh, that's just dude have $200. It's selfish. The dude hands $100 and dude's a millionaire. The value of that action itself is lessened. The whole underlying theme of that meme is like, I saw someone agree with that. I think it's context and purpose that determines if the action itself is a selfish act or a selfish act.
I think we've been going for like maybe 20 or 25 minutes now. I don't know. I didn't want to hold you for too long. So, did you have anything else that you wanted to add, or?
To be real, maybe we can talk more off camera. So it's definitely been a pleasure. It's been a good time being here. Like, I think just using the platform that we have to have conversations beyond what we're normally doing. I think what you're doing here, Mason, man, I really appreciate this. Like, it's cool. Keep it up. And yeah, just be a part of the digital age, man. Like, really engage, have conversations. Let's continue to think. Because that's the future, and we are the future. But you got my soapbox. It's been good, and thanks for having me on. And check out Village Square. If you listen to this, listen all the way. It sounds good. Tallahassee, Village Square. Trust me.
Okay. Thank you for stopping in and having the conversation. Thank you for being accommodating and cooperative. Being able to continue it. I know it's pretty difficult to continue to have like just one of these conversations, especially knowing that you're being recorded and everything. So I appreciate your efforts.
Oh, hey, it's you. You made it to the end of the video. Congratulations. And thank you so much for getting to the end of the video. You watched the whole video. Hopefully. I hope you didn't skip along. That would defeat the purpose. But nevertheless, you're here. I appreciate that. So now that you're here, this is something that I'm about to do for you specifically because you made it here. Is there any feedback that you have for me that maybe I haven't already thought of, or something that you thought about while you were watching the video? Or did you have any thoughts? Did you yourself was like, hey, I thought I really liked this one part, or this other part got me thinking, or I didn't agree with this so much, or I thought that was a good point that so-and-so made. If you have anything like that, any comments, questions, or concerns, feel free to leave it in the comments. Or if you have my number, feel free to text or call me. Either way, thank you so much for watching the whole video. Love you, I love you, I love you. Please stay tuned for the next Mondays with Mason. And the editing and the execution is going to be so much better than what it was for the first time. So yeah, thank you so much. I'll see you next Monday.